Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. Agentic automation isn't just the next step in automation, it's the future of how work gets done. By enabling intelligent, autonomous agents to take action, adapt, and collaborate, organizations are unlocking new levels of productivity, growth, and customer delight. Join us as we explore how agentic automation is reshaping work for the better, for customers, employees, shareholders, and most importantly, you. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of agentic automation, subscribe now. Let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now. I'm Brad Hairston.
And I'm Michael Marchuk.
And this is the weekly Pulse Check. We're taking a look at what's happening in the news around automation and AI. And Michael, I'm going to put you to the test today with 5 articles. So you ready to roll?
I am ready to go.
All right. First one is from Reuters, and it's titled, Meta's AI Leaders Discuss Using Google OpenAI Models in Apps. Well, lo and behold, Michael, Meta goes out and spends hundreds of millions of dollars to hire away all the top AI talent. And now they're talking about using their competitors' large language models to enhance their own products while they play catch up. What in the heck is going on?
Well, I guess this is one of those things where if you can't beat them, join them type of thing. I don't know where Meta is at and why they believe that their own internal products are not sufficient. So they have to turn to competitors in order to be able to make this happen. So I find it very interesting that they would do this, especially considering, like, as you mentioned, the significant investment in talent that they've recently made. So I'm guessing this is and the article mentions this is a temporary thing. But what temporary is, as we all know, is, hey, this is only going to last for 6 months, and yet 3 years later, we're still using it. So it'll be interesting to see what actually comes about with this. But you think about the tangled web that everybody in Silicon Valley weaves, and it shouldn't surprise us anymore that everyone else is sharing food off the same plate. And I guess that's where we're at this point now, that they're competitors, they are friends, they're frenemies, they love each other, they hate each other, they send each other money. I'm guessing that Meta will try to leverage whatever they can for these specific applications, and it doesn't really mention specifically which applications they're going to be using them for. So again, that's another question too on why they believe their model is deficient for particular applications. So anyway,
it did interesting. There was one interesting point in the article about how they're looking at Google Gemini to add conversational AI or text-based responses to the Meta chatbot. So that's one example, but you're right. They didn't really delve into, all the ways they're thinking of using.
Did you just say delve?
You
said delve. That's an AI word.
Well, but it's from my brain.
Like the M dash. You have an M dash in there too.
All right. Well, on that note, let's move on to the next article. This is it highlights a Stanford study, so we need to get more intellectual here.
Yes.
This is from Fortune. It's titled, First of Its Kind, Stanford Study Says AI is Starting to Have a Significant and Disproportionate Impact on Entry-Level Workers in the U.S. So Stanford did publish a study that says that the AI revolution, as they call it, is already beginning to have a significant impact on entry-level workers, specifically those in the 22 to 25 age bracket that are in highly AI-exposed professions like software engineering and customer service. So why don't you break it all down for us, Michael?
All right, there's 2 things to this. I believe the study is accurate. They've done this study, and I believe they're reputable in the way they've done it. The one thing I would question is who they contacted for these entry-level workers, because we had a article that we covered, a few weeks ago on a different podcast where we covered how the entry-level workers, especially in Silicon Valley, are finding it very easy to start off because they are able to go into one of these startup companies and within 5 minutes, they all have $17 billion worth of stock and they'll end up with starting their own VC firms. So I think it depends on where you're at. And also the culture of where you're at. So you mentioned a couple of different things. I think software engineering is one that definitely is going to hit, I think, more globally than it is locally in terms of the way that we've seen the offshore coding industry go. So I think that's going to be tough for folks in India and the Philippines and Vietnam and others, where in theory we being Europe, America, sending the lower level coding kind of aspects offshore. Whereas now some of the AI generated code is good enough to replace the code that was being generated by these lower cost areas. So I think that is true that we're going to have that. You also mentioned hospitality. To a certain extent, I think that there's a challenge there as well. When you think of hospitality, think of all the front desk kind of aspects related to that. So it's transitioning more to self-service type of things. Customer service for sure. We've seen a lot of that. But if you talk about the value of front-facing people, interfacing with other people, especially when it comes to, you talk about hospitality in hotels and other places, there are some things where you can be self-serve. There's a whole lot of other things where it doesn't make a lot of sense to be self-serve. So again, it really could depend on a specific role that they're looking at, where how hard it's going to be impacted. Now, if we take a step back and say, broadly speaking, is AI changing the way roles are being evaluated? Yes. And I think a lot of organizations are yet to figure out how best to bring in new talent to help them and guide them through this change pattern, because corporations themselves, organizations doing the hiring, don't understand it right now. Yeah. So a lot have decided to hold back on bringing in entry-level workers because of the training requirements. Well, I need to bring these folks up to speed, et cetera. Why can't I just do that with AI? And that's where the first, discussion point may be is, well, can we just do this with AI? It's probably cheaper. We can have it in-house. We can scale it faster. Maybe some parts of it, but not all of it. Yeah. The second part of it is, as we build these companies and the companies are deciding, well, we're not going to bring in entry-level workers. We're only going to hire experienced workers. At some point in time, there aren't anymore. So the experienced workers have all been fully employed. And unless you're Meta, who's able to throw $100 million for a hiring bonus at someone, they're likely not going to be changing jobs anytime soon. Right. Second is, if you only hire experienced people, how will they get experience if they're not being hired? So at some point in time, there's going to be a massive gap where there's going to be nobody that is going to be available, and they're going to be holding on. Kind of reminds me of the whole COBOL programmer deal. Yeah. Nobody wanted to do COBOL programming except for the folks who originally did it. And now the people who originally did it have decided to retire and come out of retirement 6 times because they are so valuable to help, restore and manage the code that has existed for past 30 so odd years. So I don't know. It's a tough place, and I think the article brings out a bunch of other things as well. But that's my interpretation of how I feel about when I read this.
Companies still need to do succession planning, and it should be succession to a human, not to a digital worker. I think that's where that whole strategy of let's forget the entry-level workers, that's going to fall apart pretty quickly.
I agree.
I think one of the most interesting things in this article was the fact that Stanford analyzed high-frequency payroll records from millions of American workers that came from ADP. I didn't realize that data was available, that you could buy that. And it's got to have demographic data associated with it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to draw these conclusions. But I just
brings up a different question altogether, is the whole data brokerage piece, which can get really scary in terms of how much they know about you and how your data is being sold, not necessarily without your knowledge.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
okay, moving on to article number 3. This is from CNET, and it's titled AI Agents Make Up a Third of All Search Traffic Toward Brands. So as people turn to AI for researching products and getting recommendations, now it turns out that instead of optimizing for Google search as they did in the past, the brands in response are pivoting toward AI optimization instead. So how can they basically attract more traffic from agents versus people if people are using agents to go and do all that research? So Michael, what do you think? Are you using agents to do all of your product research and shopping for you?
Oh, especially my shopping, because I buy a whole lot of stuff. Actually, my agent would be, I'd have to dust it off and reboot it because I don't do that much shopping myself. But when it comes to the way that brands can leverage agents and the traffic that's being generated to by these agents to look for specific brands does indicate a switch. And this is something that I think the industry saw a little bit of, late last year. This whole transition from Google searches to, hey, maybe AI searches are going to be the thing. And we are now seeing that transition happen more and more, which then leads to, as you mentioned, how do brands start to optimize for agents looking for things? And there's a couple of things that can be done in terms of, injecting your content out there in a positive way on Reddit and a bunch of other places, because evidently Reddit is one of the places that has a great deal of data that has been used to help train a lot of these agents for their work. So if you can put that out there, there's a possibility that you have some additional ways to find or improve your standing. But this isn't like search engine optimization. I believe we're going to see a whole new set of understanding of how we need to influence these agents in a different way. Right. So if I talk about search engine optimization, there's ways you go, well, this is the Google search parameter, and there's one, right? And so people have to, it's a magic formula, but people have to look towards that because that's the dominant player. But when you have several large language models that are approximately equal, OpenAI, I'd say, is probably the behemoth, but there's still others that are very well used. Perplexity is one from a search perspective that's been heavily used. How do you optimize for each of these large language models who have been trained on a separate set of data? Also, when you start talking about the capabilities of doing optimization, you also have the potential for de-optimization by your competitors. So I'm looking for Nike sneakers, and all of a sudden Adidas has a bunch of core data that they could put out there indicating that Adidas is actually a better sneaker for every possible thing. So depending on how that training data is pulled in, absorbed, and reconstituted, it may then alter the way that search engine perceives one of those two brands, depending on the search that's being used. It becomes very, very messy, and I'm not sure anybody can figure this out. The other part of it is if I were to ask you, Brad, hey, Brad, what's a good brand of sneaker to purchase right now? Well, you'd like, well, I use blah I do running with my Reeboks, and but I also have a set of ons that I wear when I want to do my strength training or whatever it is. So you may have a couple different things that you come to the table with, but your recommendations are only based very narrowly on your experience. And that's where I think these large language models are going to be stuck, because that they may not have the level of experience with a particular brand that they can draw from. So they may not have the number of reviews or the number of things they've pulled in because their training data doesn't contain it. So that could be another alternate where it may come up with, well, Adidas is the best shoe for you.
Yeah.
Just because that's the only data that's out there for them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no doubt the brands are going to figure out the best ways to attract the attention and selection by these agents. So to me, I'd love the idea of using the agents to do research and to serve up a bunch of options, and then I make the final selection. If they can save me all that research time, I think it's well worth it. But I would be reluctant to tell an agent just to go out and do all my shopping for me and tell me when it arrives. Lord knows what would end up at my house. So
I'm sure your wife would love to have that on your credit card bill too. what are all these charges to Amazon that I didn't remember you shopping on Amazon?
Yeah, exactly. All right. Article number 4. This is from Gizmodo, and it's titled, OpenAI Makes a Play for Healthcare. So, Michael, last week we covered an article titled, Your Doctor is Probably Already Using AI and You Don't Know It. This week, we have this news story that OpenAI has recently made a couple of strategic hires for their healthcare business. And the company has also been talking up GPT-5 as the best platform for offering healthcare advice, and talking people off the ledge when they have some kind of issue. They said in this article, think of it as a partner to help you understand results, ask the right questions, and then you go to the provider and you get the expert advice. So it's not in lieu of using a doctor, but they are saying GPT-5 can certainly play a big role. And so now with these new leaders, we'll see where they go in the healthcare space. So what are your thoughts on this front?
So a couple of things. We've seen people start to understand and connect with these large language models in very personal ways. So whether that's someone who's leaning on them for a relationship because they don't have any close relationships themselves or don't know who to talk to about very specific things, or are embarrassed to talk to a person about, they can talk to ChatGPT and have it respond. When it comes to all of the healthcare related things, they may choose to not go to a doctor initially because, well, I'm not sure if this is an issue yet, or should be concerned, or couldn't afford a doctor, so I'll just check and see what the web has to say on this. There's a good chance that you'll probably run across, and they said, 80% chance that you'll get across some decent information from these LLMs. But as one of these doctors said, well, that means you have 20% that's not going to be good information for you. And is that really what you want from your healthcare provider? No, you want someone who actually knows what they're talking about. So there is a potential that this information could be either misunderstood by the large language model and therefore bring you to either incorrect or misleading kind of treatment options for whatever you're talking about. Or worse yet, you could have some kind of hallucination by the LLM take you down a really, really bad path to the point where you're relying on it for something that is actually going to harm you. So these are very difficult. I think there's a really good place in healthcare for AI. We've certainly seen all kinds of pattern recognition for any kind of radiology. I think this is a fantastic way to do it, or perhaps pattern matching when it comes to obscure types of symptoms, to maybe direct doctors to a specific set of illnesses that may be extremely rare. So those are things that could be a benefit by using AI. But I don't think we're quite there yet to have the end all be all, ER doc on call through your web browser or your phone.
What about those people? I mean, we all know people like this, those that are doctor averse. They don't ever want to go to the doctor. And maybe this is a easier path for them.
Right. Well, there's folks who either are doctor averse or can't afford it. And certainly that's one option they can start to explore. Where I think there's another good potential would be, let's say your mom or your dad go to the ER or go to the doctor and have them rattle off some very doctor-esque type of words to them. And these healthcare words can be extremely long and strange. And when they say them, the doctors use this language all day long. If you have a hematoma, blah, 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 blah. What's a hematoma? What do I need to do about this? Is this a bad thing? Am I going to die? As they rattle it off, or they send this in the portal, because you don't barely even talk to a doctor anymore, it's just tossed in your portal. You can have your elderly folks or folks who may not be understanding the words that are being used, go back to a ChatGPT or to one of these large language models and say, can you explain what this means to me in a fifth grade language so I understand what it means? That's a really powerful way of doing it, because then you can take and translate what doctors have clearly said to you into the portal, but may not necessarily be understandable by you in a personal way. So
Right.
that's a really good way of doing it. So it's more of sitting down, talking you through something in a very remedial way until you do understand it. There's another powerful way that AI can be leveraged within healthcare.
Yeah, definitely. We've all heard stories about large language models giving advice that turned out to be very bad
Yes.
for an individual, for a company. So that is concerning when you're talking about healthcare. The article did cite a Stanford study, another Stanford study, they're hard at work, from last year that looked at a number of real life healthcare cases that doctors diagnosed, and they let ChatGPT look at all the data and make a diagnosis. And they found that in the majority of the cases, ChatGPT actually made a better diagnosis than the doctor. So that in and of itself is pretty interesting, but we'll see what OpenAI does here. They're really trying to play catch up to Palantir, Google, and Microsoft, who evolved on much further in the healthcare realm than they have. So we'll keep an eye on OpenAI and see just how this develops.
Exactly.
All right, our fifth and final article, and this is actually going back to a story we covered quite a while ago. This one is from BBC.com, and it's titled "How Sheer Luck Made This Tiny Caribbean Island Millions from Its Web Address." So this is talking about all the way back in the 1980s when the internet was still kind of taking shape, and countries were being handed their own unique web address or domain. And this small Caribbean island, Anguilla, which is a British overseas territory, although it's fairly independent, they landed the address .ai. And unbeknownst to them, this would make them a lot of money. So Michael, this article, which again, we covered this in the past, but this article spoke to just how much money they made last year off of this domain. So talk about that, and what are your thoughts in general on this?
Well, I did think it was very interesting because, again, it's a very small island. I want to say they have 100,000 residents, 100,000 guests that come. There's only 16,000 people who live on the island, but they have 100,000 visitors to the island because its tourism is probably one of their biggest draws. Until they start factoring in the fact that they have all of this money coming in from this .ai domain. And since they own that domain, they are also the administrator of it. And they indicated that for the 2024, that they earned about $39 million or 29 million pounds for selling domain names, which was a quarter of its total revenues, where tourism accounts for about 37%. So this is rapidly gaining to help their whole country, stay afloat, if you will. With this very, very good windfall, just because they happen to have the .ai name that was assigned to them way back when.
It's fascinating too, just how much it's grown. They said in 2020 there were 50,000 .ai domains, and now there's 850,000.
Right, we doubled last year.
Yeah, which is insane. Michael, did you also know that Anguilla is considered one of the 3 most expensive Caribbean islands to visit? Apparently they have 33 beautiful beaches with pristine sand and crystal clear water, but you better bring a trunk load full of money when you go there, because it's super, super expensive.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know anything about that. Of course, I know you have your summer getaway, your winter getaway, whatever, and Anguilla with your 500 feet of beachfront property. So, no, I did not know that. I was not aware of that, but I do know that everything in the Caribbean is very, very expensive, just because it's so beautiful down there.
Well, that's all the time we have today for the Pulse Check. Thank you for being here. Remember, we publish another podcast with a great guest every week. Be sure and check that out. Otherwise, we'll see you back here next week on the Pulse Check. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C Blue Prism. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel, as well as YouTube. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of agentic automation, subscribe now. The future of work is here.